Welcome to the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad. I'm your host, Chris Finn, and I am joined today by a really special guest. Many of you probably already know this guy, Evan Singer, host of the #1 Mental Game podcast, millions of downloads, somebody well-known in the space. And as we're always trying to do, on the Golf Fitness Bomb Squad, is not just talk about the physical side, but talk about all the sides of golf performance. And I feel like, or at least from my early days, fitness and the mental side were kind of like the step brothers of golf. Everyone wanted to go to instruction. Nobody wanted to deal with us. But Evan, our time has come. People are actually listening now. So welcome to the show, man. Excited to have you, and really an honor to have you on the show.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I love it's fun being on the other side, being a guest. I just sit back, let you throw some questions at me, and hopefully help some golfers enjoy the ride again, especially the ones that are frustrated. So always glad to chat about it.
Yeah, we were chatting before we started hitting the recording. And I think one of the things you said right off the bat was, for every frustrated golfer that you could help, like that meant the world to you. And, for me on the physical side, a lot of it we get a lot of they're frustrated on the physical side. Their body's not holding up. And definitely a lot of the older golfers who are looking at giving up the game of golf. So it's fun to hear and get to chat and hang with somebody, like-minded, who's looking to help golfers play a better game and do it for a really long time. But for those of us, listening who maybe don't know your story, or, maybe they haven't, this is their first time, obviously getting to kind of be exposed to you. And for those of you who don't know, it's thepartrain.com, the Par Train podcast. Definitely, it's a massive following, great content you definitely need to listen to. But tell us, Evan, how did you get into this? How do we end up here?
Well, it's been about 8+ years in the making, but the Genesis story was kind of funny. I've told it other places, but I'll tell it here too. My co-host, Matt Cermak, was from this. His family's known in Chicago. He's all four boys played D1 college golf. And I didn't know him growing up. My best friend, my buddy Ryan, who played D1 college at Missouri State, ended up being Matt's teammate. And so over the years, my buddy Ryan's like the ultimate connector. Everyone who knows him ends up becoming friends too. So Cermak and I started becoming good friends, and we both love to geek out over different golf stuff, where our buddy Ryan was more of that pure ball striker player that never knows what he does in the swing, doesn't care what club he uses. You tell him at the top of his swing what kind of shot to hit and he can do it. Cermak and I are much more like, I think, the everyday. Yeah. Well, even though he's a scratch college player, I'm a single digit handicap, but we like to tinker. We like to understand why things happen. We like to change stuff. So make the long story short, Cermak and I decided to give a joint speech at Ryan's wedding during his rehearsal dinner. And it sounds so cliche and silly looking back, but we kind of brought the house down. I don't want to pat ourselves in the back, but we kind of just had this spark with the microphone, and it was so fun and it was such a blast. And somehow we were like, we have to do something together. And it just kind of started like that. And the show didn't really start as a mental show, by the way. Kind of started talking tour, and we tried to bring a fun side of the tour. And then it just kind of hit me. It was there's a lot of people talking tour, but the thing I really love, the thing I really care about, the thing I focus on in my life, even outside of golf, is my mental work, and how the way that I look at a situation, the way I look at a person, the way I look at myself totally dictates my experience, good or bad. And I read Zen Golf when I was 16 years old, and started using golf as a practice for all of that. So we kind of 3 years in kind of evolved to that. And now that, ironically, it's kind of what we're known for. So yeah, who knew a wedding speech where one guy wears a blonde wig and acts like the bride, and I act like the husband wearing a St. Louis Blues hat, can go into becoming, a top podcast in the golf space. Who knew?
That's amazing. I mean, all good stories and all good things start clearly with a wig.
Right. Exactly.
Great speech. That's amazing. So I guess, so take me through, and for people listening, obviously, before I have people on the show, I do some research and try to learn a little bit about them. And one of the things that struck me is I was particularly looking at your website, thepartrain.com, for those of you who don't know it. We'll make sure to put it all in the show notes for you too. But was the number of like testimonials, I guess if you want to call them, or I guess golf, the number of golf lives that you've saved, just the number of people in the comments, it struck me of how many people saying like, oh my God, I was going to quit the game of golf. And then you stepped in and now I've never played better golf. Or it struck a chord. We talked a little bit about this prior of, on the physical side, we get like, oh, my back was bad and thanks for making it better. I mean, this is different level stuff though. Like guys like literally about to quit the game and talk to the listeners. What, like in those instances, like what has happened and how do you approach somebody? Obviously that's an extreme example, but and we can dive into how you look at it, helping just kind of average golfers too. But in that extreme example, like how do you deal with that? That's got to be hard.
Yeah, no, it's why we do it. It's why I love getting up in the morning. It's why people ask me, how do you post so much content? Like, it's like, well, it's not like I'm trying to do it. Like, yeah, I actively am, but that's all I think about. I look at my wife's giving birth to our first child in November, and she joked with me. She's so supportive and she's so amazing. She goes, hey, I love you. I know you see everything through the lens of golf, but if you use a golf analogy on me during childbirth, I will kill you. But that's just kind of how I'm wired. Like I look at everything through the lens of golf. And, I will say we've gotten messages from people that were going to get a divorce, that somehow the principles that we talk about helped in their marriage. Like this stuff applies to everything. Yeah. The one thing I will say, it's different for everybody, but I think there's real power in the way you look at things. So like one very simple example that a lot of people could relate to is like, and I talked to Grayson Murray about this when he was on the podcast and we were just talking to him about him before we recorded. I was talking to him about, the difference between competing and protecting, competing versus preventing.
Yep.
And that is a very subtle line. A lot of times you don't even realize when you're in protecting or preventing or guiding. And I struggle with this every day myself. So, even though I do coach people mentally, I still struggle with a lot of things. And I actively share that on our Instagram and social platforms because I want people to kind of go through the journey with me. And I'm trying to grow every day, just like everybody else. But, I think when you think about that, if you ask yourself, like, in those moments, if you have the ability to step back, and I'm working on this with my coach every day, he's like, okay, so the job is to walk into a shot and get really clear on what you're trying to do. Number one, a lot of us don't even do that. Yeah. I'm guilty of it all the time. Focus is very hard for me. I can get very technical very quickly. I will forget that the lie dictates the shot. I look too much at the target. So step one, I might not even be stepping into a shot, being clear on what I want to do. Right. Yeah. From there, it's like, am I trying to not make something happen or am I trying to make something happen? Right. That's a very different state as well. You could be playing an entire round of golf, trying not to hit it right, versus getting really clear on where you want it to go. That subtle line could totally change someone's game round to round. 100%. Now, let's say you do that. Now you're talking to another level. You go to the next round. Do you know how hard it is to go to the next round and not try and replicate what you did before? Mm-hmm. But how can you go into the next shot round with entirely blank slate of like, what am I trying to do here? What is this giving me? Where do I want to go? What are my keys that help me do that? oh, there's nerves, there's doubt, there's that pass shot from last week that it looks exactly like this. Okay, what do I need to get back? What helps me do that? Okay, well, I know my coach tells me all the time, dude, you got to drive the speed limit.
Yeah.
I don't care how fast your car is. If you take a Ferrari down a super narrow hill and you're driving 130, that car is going to crash.
Bad things are going to happen.
Yeah. So, that's a few examples of like, I think a lot of people sometimes think the mental game is like this only reserved for tour pros. My pre-shot routines, the things I say to myself, that's all there, but it's ingrained in everything we do. The body doesn't move until the brain tells it what to do. And if you don't tell it what to do, or it's filled with doubts, then it creates tension and interference. And I think the game is really a practice of trying to remove interference, and that's what it is.
100%. I think I had a recent experience personally of starting to try to play competitively, as I've shared on the pod with people. And I actually qualified for the state am. And in that round, I went in trying to make the cut. And it was the first time in my life through 14 or 15, I was 2 under. I was like, all right, pretty sure I'm going to qualify. But it was that exact moment of, am I going to protect it or am I going to pursue winning? And it was funny in my mind. And it was like, I no longer cared about the cut. I was like, I'm going to try to win. And then, I doubled the next hole, went back to even, but it was like, I'm still, all right, if I birdie the next 2 or 3 and I birdied the next hole, it was the first time, I played basketball through college and I always felt it there. It was the first time in golf that I got to the point of, to your point of, I was playing the game and I was thinking about what can I do, not necessarily what can I avoid doing. And that has been a massive difference for me personally, to your point, particularly as I'm trying to, post a score, and but it's just funny that you brought that up because literally this was like 2 weeks ago and it was like, oh, that's different. I've never felt that in a round before, but it was like almost, I don't want to say magical, but it was such a, I guess you say like a pressure relief, and maybe tell me if that's right or wrong, but it almost felt, I guess, less stressful because there was, not like, oh, I'm a couple under, I hope I don't screw it up. It was how many more birdies can I make? How deep can I go? And it was a subtle, but it was an important mind shift for me in terms of like freeing me up. It almost felt like, does that like translate?
Oh, yeah.
Or have you seen
That's
that
huge.
before?
I've heard that. Do you know how many times I've heard that from tour pros? Of people that go to the Corn Ferry, and suddenly, you got to shoot 20 under.
Yeah.
And if you don't make cuts, you lose your status and you don't qualify or you don't get points. And then it's like, I don't think people realize how difficult everybody like romanticizes the pro golf lifestyle on tour, especially at the biggest tours. But I don't know how those guys do it, to be honest with you. Like, with your livelihood being on the line and your identity so wrapped in with what you've always been, which is the good golfer, to not, that's so tough, And what I think is great about what you just said is I don't even see it necessarily as trying to win or protect to cut. You just got back to competing again.
Right. Yeah.
For me, that's like one of the biggest things that I have to constantly, and I don't mean like every few weeks, I mean like every hole. Yeah. Every shot, I have to remind myself, and I do this for a living. Like, I have to remind myself, I'm protecting again. I'm trying not to fail again.
Yeah.
I need to compete. When I compete, I usually do okay.
Yeah.
But I think we get away from it because of what it means.
100%. So let me ask you a question, because this has always been something that's, that I guess has kind of been interesting to me. I've been doing what I do in the fitness space for, over a decade at this point. A lot of young players have come in. We're in Raleigh area, so there's University of North Carolina, there's Duke, so we get a lot of Wake Forest right down the road. We have a lot of very high level players from around here, just in the Southeast. And a lot of them have come through. A lot of them have, we've evaluated them, and by no means does the best athlete win at golf, right? There's been people that have come in and I'm like, holy crap, like that power number out of their legs or the speed, like, oh my gosh, this person is going to kill it. But it has always perplexed me and I'm sure you've seen this in your experience with these high level players. What do you find is the difference? Because where I'm at and in my kind of understanding of a lot of these players that have come in is they can all shoot 62. They can all hit it really far, but there's definitely something between the ears that separates these guys and these girls. And so when you have a high level player that comes to you and like, what are the types of things you look for? Or have you been able to identify kind of some markers of people who are going to be successful, such as I'm going to compete and I'm not going to protect, right? Or, afraid to fail. What have been some of the markers that you've identified or that you see in those truly successful, high level players?
I've never said this before. I've never even thought it before, but for some reason, and I might need this clip from you after, but I think it might be this weird line that they walk of the best golfers have an unbelievable fight to them, but a fight cannot translate to trying harder.
Right.
I think golf is one of the only sports that the harder you try, I'm experiencing this recently.
I think everyone listening has probably experienced this.
The harder you try, sometimes the worse you play.
Yeah.
But the fight part, there is a reason why Tiger has the records he has. For Tiger Woods to be as dominant as he was, to be won over towards the weekend, for him to not get frustrated and be like, how could you be shooting one over when you're beating everybody the last 5 weeks in a row?
Right.
And then he fights to treat the next 6 holes like the Sunday at a US Open on a broken leg to make the cut because he believes he just created a new challenge for himself, right? To your example about making the cut, he didn't treat making the cut, at least from what I perceive on the outside, it didn't become like an ego thing. Ooh, I might miss the cut, or I might break the streak, or I might not make a paycheck. It was a new thing to compete for. He created a new competition. So his fight on every shot to give the focus. I always joke, golfers should play every hole like it's a horse race at a member guest. I played some of my best golf in a horse race.
Yeah.
Because it's like, that you live and die on every shot.
Mm-hmm.
So golfers play much more strategically because you're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
So we much more follow like a decade golf mentality of aggressive swings to conservative targets. We don't try and make big numbers. We get really focused. Now, not every golfer performs well in a horse race because of the pressure and everybody watching. But for me, it's really helped because it forces me to focus and have that fighter mentality on every shot. So I think that's a very interesting dichotomy of like not trying too hard, but having a relentless fight. And then the second example would be my buddy I referenced in earlier, my best buddy growing up who played in college, Ryan. He was always like the number 1 or number 2 ranked amateur for his age in Missouri, where I grew up. And Scott Langley was the other 1 or 2. He hates when I tell this story, Ryan does. But Ryan didn't play after college. Ryan now works for commercial insurance. He's very successful. He loves what he does. He's very good at it. But Scott Langley, Ryan always told me the difference between Ryan and Scott was when Ryan was like 5 under, he would do what came to mind for you in your first competitive event.
Yeah.
He'd say, what can I do to get this in the house?
Yeah.
To get this in the clubhouse? How can I get this 5 under in the clubhouse?
Yeah.
Scott Langley would say, how can I take this to 8?
Yeah.
And that is a very subtle difference that I see in really good amateurs and then pros.
That's amazing. Yes, it's been something that I've always kind of struggled with on the fitness side for us. It's like, how do you identify a player who needs help with that, or who maybe what might struggle with that? And it's interesting you bring up the word fight. I used to do when I'd get a good player just to kind of see what they were how bad they wanted it, what I'd do is because I'm in the fitness world, so it's pretty simple and not a lot to it. I'd put a sled on each side of the turf. I'd load one of the sleds up with a bunch of weight, and I'd say, push the heavy sled down, run the light sled back, and then they'd say, well, how many? And I say till you're done. And they, well, what do you mean? I said, well, just keep going. I'll tell you when you're done. And it was wild that there's only been like 3 or 4 people that have ever finished it, and I had to tell each and every one of them to stop, and each and every one of them are playing professionally now. It was so there was this fight. I had there was one girl who literally was pushing from her knees, like, like knees were like bloodied, and she's continuing. I'm like, hey, no, we're good, we're good. Like, but there was that fight, and there were other people who were there's one woman who comes to mind. She was the best athlete I've ever seen, like just test wise, like test scores, right? But never, played on the Epson tour and never really kind of made anything after a number of years. And she gave up after like 3 trips down and back. She was like, I'm done. Right. And it was just a very interesting, if you had given me just test results physically, I said, oh, that person's got the most potential. But then when you actually looked, to your point, I guess, what is the quote unquote fight in them? It was very interesting how the only people that have ever really truly finished that test by, finish meaning me saying, hey, please stop. So nothing bad happens. Like, they're the ones who actually made it. It was very interesting to see that on the physical side.
That's fascinating. I also think the fight is the fight to not give up mentally.
Right.
I think we've all had rounds where the club feels foreign in your hands and you're hitting it both ways and you're hitting a miss that you haven't hit either in a long time or ever. And it's like, are you going to give up and be like, I suck?
Yeah.
Why do I play this game? Which we've all probably felt many times.
Yeah.
Or do you have the fight to like try and walk into the next one with a blank slate? And I know it sounds cliche, but maybe the difference is, that make it more tactical for your listeners, is you can't just like forget about the bad. I think the key is to get curious on why the bad happened in a more objective way. So
right.
Like constantly be reflecting on, okay, maybe that was just a bad swing. Or did I get quick? Oh, I got quick. I forgot my key of driving the speed limit. Okay. Or maybe I wasn't focused. I didn't even think about what I was doing. Maybe I was trying to prevent a result instead of getting clear on what I wanted to do. So then when you walk into the next shot, it's not, I suck, I want to quit, I'm going to try and do the opposite or not create what just happened. I'm just recommitting to the thing that helps me be successful. And then you try and do that as many times as possible. And then you pick up your head and start again,
For us, I'm a big proponent in the physical space of like, we always assess. Our saying is like, we assess, we don't guess, right? And let's try to figure out physically what's what, and we use the science around like, hey, we know that this causes this or whatever based on stats. And in a way, I would say, well, the physical I think is a lot easier than the mental side to diagnose. And even that being so, I literally had a call today with a guy, an advisor, and he's on his way driving to the PGA Superstore to get a new putter. And I'm so, why are you getting a new putter? He says, because I suck at putting. I remember I didn't play well. I missed all these putts. And I said, well, was it your read or was it your stroke? It was at least some stroke. So I'm just getting a new putt. Like, he's immediately going to a fix and doesn't even know why the heck he's missing putts. So all that said to say, on the mental side, like for the average golfer listening, how do you help people actually figure out what that, people, we can say like, hey, be curious about why that happened. Obviously you work with players, you have packages and stuff. Like, when you work with somebody, is there a certain process that you help them go through to identify what those kind of curiosity points should be? Or, how do you kind of address that, with the average golfer listening?
Yeah. So I kind of use mental golf type as a foundational system. If you haven't heard of it, it's essentially driven kind of like a Myers-Briggs personality test, but it's rewritten and designed for golf. So
That's really cool.
like I'm an ENFP,
Mhm.
so I'm an extroverted, intuitive feeler perceiver.
Yep.
So there's nothing analytical about um, me.
Right.
I'm a conversationalist. I'm a storyteller. I'm a creative.
So you should
Um,
practice always on TrackMan with data in front of you all the
yeah,
time, right? Yeah.
but you know what's really interesting is the way that system works is you have your regular modes and then you have stress mode. So there's no such thing. It's just like our dominant hand versus our
Yep.
non-dominant hand. We
Hmm.
still use our left hand or our left arm, but it's not our dominant,
Right.
right? So that other side of our personality, it's there, but it's not dominant. So when I am in stress on the course, my extroverted mode means I get quiet and internal. I don't talk to anybody. I look down.
So
So,
basically, you do the
you know,
opposite of what your
I do the
natural is.
opposite of what I
Interesting.
naturally
Yeah.
do. And that is that's actually true across the board. So if I get overly technical, I shouldn't be getting overly technical
Right.
because
Yeah.
I don't do that in any other form of my life. And I like creating things. So why not visualize and create and then recreate what I see versus getting really technical about positions? So that's
Makes
another
so much
sign that
sense.
I'm
Yeah.
in stress mode,
Yeah.
right? So like one of my players that went from he's a surgeon here in LA and he was I think an 8 and we got him down to a 3 with no swing changes, simply by figuring out what does he do on the golf course that he doesn't do anywhere else in his life,
That's
right?
awesome.
So, and
It's such a awesome way to think about it. It
yeah, and
seems
it
so
was
intuitive now
cool.
that you say it. It's like, well, yeah, why wouldn't you do
It
that?
was cool, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and a lot of times we'd uncover things like one good example is I think golf especially. I think we get rooted and weighed down by the word should.
Hmm.
So what we should do, what we're supposed to do.
Hmm.
So my player was like always super target focused.
Okay.
Everyone talks about target, right?
Yeah.
But based on his mental golf type, focusing out on the target was putting him into stress. He actually should have been so there's target side, there's player side,
Hmm.
and there's different dominant and I guess recessive parts of it. So based on his mental golf type, and Tiger is this way too, and you'll see Xander do this. Like some
Hmm.
players, they obviously stand behind the ball to figure out where they want to go,
Yeah.
but you'll see them. They kind of do their little waggle. They might look like an inch in front of them. Some
Yeah.
of them don't even look out at the target,
Yeah.
right? Because you have your line. By focusing out on the target, you might be more inclined to see where you don't want to go.
That's
So
wild.
he
Yeah.
needed to be more player side dominant. So just that change and giving him permission that he's not doing something wrong by not obsessing over his target before he pulls the trigger
Yeah.
was huge for him,
That's
especially off the
amazing.
tee.
So
So
basically,
like
as
there's
long as he
little
got his
things like that.
line, he was given clearance, or like it was okay to just not then worry about it at that point going out far.
Yeah,
Once he
so
had his, yeah,
let me
that's
explain what
cool.
player side means.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
we called it I came up with like a stupid term like feelization instead of visualization.
Yeah.
So for him, he was more technical. So if we got him to think of a not positional, but sensory feel in his swing. So whether that means tempo, whether that means staying in his posture, whether that means um, rotation, something that he knows through practice and work is really key to his success. It was almost like a feelization. So you get behind the ball, you get your line, and then you try and feel the swing you're trying to create. Doesn't need to be a full practice swing. And you see a lot of pros kind of do that, just kind of like a little bit of a half swing feel.
Yeah.
Then his only job is to step into that box and repeat the feel. So it really freed him up. So a lot of times it's like little stuff like that. Other people, it's, you know, there's a lot of demons and trauma of the past of certain shots, which I still battle myself in my stuff. And it's more life stuff. and helping them show up to as who they are, so that you're not draining your battery, but you're keeping it full.
So yeah, so that I mean that's the first example of I like that feelization. That's you need to like trademark that somehow.
Yeah.
But I mean that to me that makes a lot of sense. I can relate in that I do better if I pick my spot, 8 inches, 12 inches in front of the ball, and I don't look at the target again. And you actually just feel like you just gave me permission. That's okay. Because I was like, well, should I look at the target?
Yeah, it's weird,
Yeah,
right?
it's weird, but it actually works really well for me. But now the second you said like be yourself, bring yourself to the golf course. So what do you mean by that? Like the first example to me, I feel like is very clear, and people listening are gonna understand that. What is when you say like bring yourself? How do people not bring themselves to the golf course? If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I have a player who I'm working with right now, and this guy, I got to convince him to come on the par train and do a podcast together because
Yeah.
this is a guy who has done a ton of work over the years, has great levels of awareness, loves to dig in and understand what makes him tick, loves to work on his own growth, um, but has dealt with um, this desire to be accepted forever,
Hmm.
right? From an early age. And so every time he showed up to the golf course, it was he hit it a long way.
Hmm.
So he was always sizing up his group to be like, are these my people, or are they going to be like not accepting of me?
Right.
Right. He was kind of always on the defensive.
Okay.
And the way that he hit the golf ball and his length was a way that he was going to be accepted. Right.
Got it.
And the unbelievable thing is, as he has gotten away through our work of relying less on what other people expect from him or think about him, and he has gotten into what I learned from my own coach, be the host,
Hmm.
where you focus on sizing up others, you focus on trying to help others enjoy their good shots, and he started to accept himself more. Golf kind of became this very simple, like, meditation for him. And now he's a one handicap, and he was an
That's
eight
amazing.
like 3 months ago.
That's
And
wild.
he's getting invited to all these things. Everyone's walking up to him and be like, come play with us. That was
Yeah.
amazing. And he feels like he's shooting lower scores than ever. Um, even in 4 rounds,
Yeah.
because it doesn't mean as much to him. So ironically, that's a good example of like, before all he wanted to do was become a five.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
then I asked him, so now that you're a three, do you feel like all is well in the world,
Yeah.
and you don't have to do anything else and you've done it? And he goes, no, I actually love to become a scratch. And I go, isn't that interesting how the target always moves?
Yeah.
But he's become more comfortable with it, that ironically he had kind of already done it.
Yeah.
So the grip got lighter,
Yeah.
and not just on the golf club. And now he's a one, and it's just so interesting how, golf is the ultimate. No one is safe on the golf course. You have to walk into that shot regardless of how uncomfortable you feel, and how bad the miss was 10 minutes before.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the way you show up and how you translate what those shots mean about yourself and what other people think, that makes a huge difference, because it's your energy, it's your tension, it's everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm hearing you talk. You talked earlier about like I always call it the world of shoulds, but like these judgments that we put on ourselves and creates more pressure. And particularly if you obviously it sounds like this guy acceptance kind of challenges. Is that something that's pretty common among most golfers, or is there a most I don't know the top most common judgment that people tend to struggle with to kind of that you have to help them get over? Like, is that a common thing, or is that a pretty isolated incident that you've seen with that gentleman that gone? I mean, from eight to a one in 3 months is wild.
Yeah. What is the most common thing that people have to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, if there is one, or it's just it's very interesting to me hearing you talk about just this guy's judging. He's placing these judgments on himself. He's assuming that he knows he's in these other guys' heads, right? He's like,
Right.
and that's is that a pretty common uh, thing that you see, I guess, in golfers? This kind of insecurity. I have to imagine
Oh
it's
yeah, for
not
sure.
uncommon. Yeah,
I think it's totally human and normal to want to be accepted. And I learned this in member guests. Like, I so badly want to contribute to the team
yeah,
that I'm pressing the entire time without even realizing it because all I want to do is contribute,
yeah,
But when all you want to do is contribute, you just lost focus on everything else that's important to hit a good golf shot,
yeah,
right? So, I think the probably the most common thing is just spending 5 hours trying to make something not happen.
yeah,
We had Bob Rotella on the show years ago. It's still our number one episode. I think episode 172. But and this was very controversial when I shared his quote, but I still think about it to this day. He said to me, because I used to play baseball growing
yeah.
up in St. Louis, and he said, if I told you to throw that ball over that tree, would you think about your elbow and your shoulder angle?
Yeah.
Or would you just look at the top of the tree and throw it over? And I said, I guess you're right, Doc. I'd probably just look at the top of the tree and throw it over. Now, a lot of comments came in that throwing a ball is not nearly as technical as a golf swing or
Hmm.
complex.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I think you have to reach a certain level of basic fundamentals.
Hmm.
But I will tell you, I've been playing this game for 18 years and I've been getting a lesson every month this year,
Yeah.
trying to really, because I've got some serious technical issues that does create big misses.
Right.
And so I've been working on that a lot. But ironically, despite all of that swing work, when I just look at my target and I get really clear on what I'm trying to do, I hit better shots. Like I think Tim Ferriss just posted this quote of like, anytime you feel overwhelmed, it's a moment to think about what can I subtract.
Yeah.
And I think that is so true for the golf game.
That's powerful. The it's funny, the course I play at here in Raleigh area. There's a back of the 13th tee is a big hill, and there's a famous story of Dr. Rotella. He was working with a guy from one of the Carolina kids there, and he's telling the guy going through his pre-shot routine. He doesn't realize he's standing right on the edge of this literally like 12-foot drop off down the hill, and he gets the guy going, and he takes a step back and he rolls down the hill. And from now on, that hill has been called the Rotella Hill. So it's a funny just connection to Dr. Rotella, and he was obviously one of the greats in the space, and that's really really cool. Well, Evan, I don't want to take all of your time here, and people are probably starting to get to their destinations. But the last question I kind of wanted to ask you is, I've really enjoyed our conversation. For a golfer, I've always struggled to find people to tell a golfer, "Hey, if you're struggling with your mental side, this is somebody to go to." Um, I strongly suspect this is going to resonate. We've talked about with a lot of people. How do obviously they go to the website, they can sign up to work with you, just to give people an idea of when they come in, when you start to work with somebody new, what does that process look like for them? And, and just kind of just to give some people some context of that process. Sounds like there's an assessment that they go through that really helps you. And that's near and dear to my heart, being the geek that I am on the fitness and physical space. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that for listeners, I think that's going to be really, really helpful for them.
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is hop aboard the podcast and listen to some episodes for free. You might not even need me as a coach, and you might be able
Can't
to
beat
just,
that.
yeah, you
Yeah.
might just be able to listen to the episodes that, connect with you based on the titles and start to start to put some of that stuff into practice. But if someone is really struggling, the process is basically where I'll do a free assessment through Mental Golf Type where you take like a 5 minute quiz. It spits out your result. Um, and we don't use that for everything, but it's a great foundational thing to just kind of understand how someone's wired. I'll do like a little bit of in the first call, I'll do like an introductory verification exercise where I'll kind of read some prompts through your mental golf type, but in life scenarios, and it should really feel like, yes, it's almost creepy how much that is me. If there's any like waffling, which it does happen more than you'd think, be like, that part's me, but that part, I'm definitely not very technical in that way in life. So, and I'd be like, oh, interesting. So we might test some other types because sometimes we subconsciously answer things in ways that we either would like to be or think we are, but maybe we're not in the moment. So those tests aren't perfect. So we'll verify that first and first feel like what we have for you is right. And from there, the way I like to coach is we'll have a 50-minute call and we'll try and laser in on like one thing. What is one thing that's really getting in our way? What is one low-hanging fruit of just let's get back to things that are naturally you, you know? Or let's remove some tension or remove some judgment. So after each call, it'll kind of be like, all right, the focus is going to be X, right? And then I want that player to then go and play two minimum 2 weeks, at least play once. And then I want it to be the best part about coaching in my mind. I have multiple coaches, is you create a feedback loop and you create accountability and you create support. So, it's an evolving, growing thing. So we might give you one thing to go work on, and then you come back and you're like, I was really confused about X, Y, and Z. And either we clarify it, we tweak it, or you come back and have great success and we build on it. Right. So it's this
Yeah.
constant feedback loop where we're adding, we're subtracting, we're tweaking. Sometimes I've had calls I don't even talk about golf.
Yeah.
Sometimes people, what's showing up in the golf course is from something else. And we talk about that. Those are some of my favorite calls
Yeah. I
because I
bet.
actually don't think I'm here to help people play better golf. My coach told me this today. She goes, I actually think you're here to help people feel happier and use things from golf to help them in every situation. That's more powerful to me.
That's powerful.
Golf is
Yeah.
just the way that we're kind of talking about it.
Yeah. There's the conduit through which it's
Yeah.
occurring. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. And
Can I ask you one question before we go?
I love the flip. Let's do
So,
it.
since you're a body and fitness and physical guy, I would love to get your thoughts on this. This is something I've struggled with personally, and that I've seen in people where, what happens when you go into a stressful situation with fight or flight. It's physically harder to
Yep.
have fast twitch muscles. Your your body's literally preparing to fight.
Yep.
So to have like a fluid motion can sometimes be very difficult. Is there anything that you've done to help people? Obviously, I know there's a ton of breathing techniques out there. Is
Mhm.
there anything else that you've done that helps regulate that so that someone that's stressed or playing really poorly
Mhm.
and can't figure out how to slow down out there? Is
Yeah,
there
I
anything
think
you've done?
yeah, I think two of the other ones is obviously, as you know, it's all parasympathetic, sympathetic
Right.
influence, right? So obviously the breathing is the big one that a lot of people will do. And obviously when you breathe in, the heart rate goes up. When you breathe out, the heart rate slows down. The other two that I like that I think are relatively easy. The first one is probably the easiest, and that's like extreme cold, like taking ice basically on like pressure points. So whether on either side of like the temples or right inside your wrists. There's pressure points there. That's a way to kind of, from a nervous system standpoint, kind of, or have a bit of a reset. It's also really cold, so that tends to take your focus off of whatever it is that's stressing you out.
Yeah.
The other one obviously is you can do what's called basically intense, like short-term intense exercise bursts. Like some people will do a bunch of squats or lunges or jumping jacks just to like get your heart rate up really, like I don't want to say not extreme, but a big jump in heart rate in a short term can actually help to reset people as well too. So that one sometimes may look a little weird if you're on the golf course and you just start doing like 100 jumping jacks. But I find the ice or the cool, typically ice instead of just like a cold water ball, but something really hot. You almost, if you're frustrated, you almost like you would put your hands in your head, just have 2 ice cubes in each hand and put it on the temples. That tends to help to reset people a little bit. And but to your point, I think any of those kind of physical resets, when paired with a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today, that understanding kind of that curiosity that you mentioned earlier on in the conversation about identifying, and kind of doing that little bit of self-assessment when in the moment, those physical cues, I definitely feel like help to free up. Just what I've experienced personally too, free up my mind where it's like, oh, okay, deep breath. Okay, now I can like recenter and refocus and continue. At the end of the day, to me, the word of this episode is compete, right? And I get back to competing. How do I remove what I've heard from you is, what is everything that's in the way of me competing, and how do I look to remove that so that I can compete? And so those are long-winded answer. Those would be the 2 other kind of quick ways that I've generally will have kind of mentioned to people a little bit. Hey, this has worked for me, or but I very quickly am like, hey, I'm not the mental guy. Now, go check out the PAR train, because that's where to go. And and obviously, I can't thank you enough for being on the show today, Evan. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. I've learned a lot personally, selfishly. It's one of the reasons, I don't know if this is true for you, but for hosting podcasts for me, one of the selfish reasons why I love having guests is it's like I get to ask questions for myself. And like we didn't plan it, but you telling the story about the surgeon who, just looking in front and like giving him permission to do that. Like I thank you for the permission going this weekend to the stadium. I'm not going to feel like I should be looking at the putting that judgment on myself, and I should be looking at the pin, right? Like, so I know everyone here has gotten a lot out of the episode, and I can't thank you enough. Obviously, the PAR train. Where else I want to make sure I don't leave anything out where people can find you and your content. I know we get a YouTube channel that's blowing up. Where should they search you out?
Yeah, YouTube. I mean, all the places that you want to, whatever your favorite place to consume content, we're probably there at the PAR train. So find us wherever you get it. Instagram's our biggest audience, but yeah.
Awesome.
Send me a DM. I try and read them all. Yeah, we're trying to, help frustrated golfers enjoy the ride again. So, I love getting people's messages and stories. So if anybody has questions or something they want to share, DMs are open.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evan. Everybody definitely hit up the PAR train. And as always, thanks for hanging out. And hopefully we diffused a few bombs for you today. None really physical today, mostly the bigger type, in my opinion, in golf, the mental ones. So hopefully some myths or false beliefs have been blown up for you, and you're on your way to playing better golf. Like we say here at P4S Golf, longevity is the key. And if you're frustrated, you ain't going to have that either. So definitely take heed of everything Evan said. Check out the PAR train. And thanks again, as always, for hanging out with us. And we'll catch you on the next episode.